kind of the reaction to the depression and stuff going on here. Okay. And I talked about, a lot of people blame themselves. And then these 7, 8, 10 million people that are forced off of farms, mostly to the cities. Okay. Now, listen, guys, if you're packing up your farm in Missouri, okay, you guys been to Missouri? And you're like, okay, we're going to go west. So you lost your house, you lost your farm, okay? All you have is your car. So you have your vehicle, pack the family into the vehicle, take whatever you can, like you're stacking luggage all over the car. You know what I mean? You're taking as much as you can carry with the car. Some of you guys have been there, done that. Okay, I know the Stevensons probably have, load up the car, right? Now you're driving west, and you drive through Wichita. Okay, now Wichita has its own problems. We got a lot of homeless. We got people that are hungry. We got unemployed. We got problems. We don't want more problems. So you drive into Wichita to get gas for your car. And there's people standing around saying, listen, you need to move on. You need to keep going. We don't want you here. We got enough people with problems here. You just need to keep moving. Get out. Okay? It was like that all over the country, guys. When people were migrating from one place to another, they didn't need more people with more problems. Okay? It's kind of a scary time. People would hop on trains. Okay? It's illegal to hop on a train. You know what I mean? But people would do it just to escape and go somewhere else. Hopefully times were better there. Okay? So you got a significant, massive number of people migrating from one place to another during this time period. Okay? There were some jobs in California, but as I described last week or earlier yesterday, the jobs were not good jobs. Okay? All right. So as veterans began to really struggle with unemployment when the Depression hit in, remember the bonus bill, the Adjusted Compensation Act. Remember I did the math for you. You got $1 for every day you served at home, $1.25 for every day you served overseas, and you could borrow up to 25% of that. But that insurance policy did not mature until 1945. So if you got $820, which is what we did, somebody that was in the military for 2 years, you borrowed 25% of that, you got about $205. Okay? The other $600 you're still owed. But you can't get that money until 1945. So between 20 and 25,000 veterans marched to Washington. Now, do these veterans have money to stay in a hotel? No. So Hoover, President Hoover, opens up some vacant government buildings, even the Capitol itself, feeds them, okay, gives them somewhere to sleep. Now they're sleeping on the floor, okay, but he gives them somewhere to sleep. And while this legislation is going through Congress to give the veterans their money, and one of the congressmen from Texas proposed that, all right, instead of giving them the $600, let's just give everybody, all these veterans, $500. Okay? Now, do we have this money in the Treasury to give $500 to all these veterans? Remember, there were 3 million men that were in the service by the end of World War I. It went from 125,000 to 3 million. You're going to be able to give $500 to 3 million people? The bill fails. They were there to support this bill that was going to give them all $500. And then the bill failed. It did not pass Congress. So what happened? A bunch of them left. Some of them didn't have anywhere to go. So they stayed and they built a Hooverville or a shantytown down the street from the White House. Okay? Now, these people that are left in the White House, these are veterans. And they're mad. They didn't get their money. So you start to see some riots, stuff like that happening in D.C., right down the street from the White House. And after a while, Hoover gets tired of this. So he calls in the army. Now, who's Mac and who's Ike? Ike is Eisenhower. Mac is General Douglas MacArthur. Okay? These two are put in charge. They're going to send the tanks down the street. You're going to have cavalry, horseback. Okay? And they're going to tell these veterans they need to leave. Now, if you see the cavalry and tanks rolling down the street in Washington, D.C., you're thinking, hey, it's a parade, right? I mean, how often do you see U.S. Army tanks in the streets of America? You don't see that. The veterans of the Army are like, oh, look, it's the Army. They're not there for a parade. They tell the people to leave. They're like, we're not leaving. Fights break out. Shots are fired. They start to burn down the shanty town. And it looks something like this when it's all said and done. You can see the Capitol in the background. This is the shanty town burning right down the street from the White House. President Hoover has just called out the United States Army on U.S. citizens, not any U.S. citizens, but veterans of World War I citizens. You guys know what optics are? How does this look for Hoover? Can you think in American history, now you can't include the Boston Massacre here, okay, or the battles of Lexington and Concord, because that was the British, okay? Can you think of another time in American history where the United States Army was called out against its citizens? Okay, the Civil War. There's your exception. Okay.
So you said think of another time, but you named like 4.
I've named one.
You said Lexington.
That's the British. It's not the U.S. government. Boston Police Strike. That's the National Guard. Is that what you said? Okay, the National Guard. Now that is common. National Guard has been called out hundreds of times to keep the peace. Okay. Those are controlled by governors. So right now, the governor of Texas is using the Texas National Guard to defend the border. Now, could Biden federalize them and take them out of control of the governor? Yes. Which is what Eisenhower did in 1957 in Little Rock, when he sent the 101st Airborne into Little Rock, Arkansas, to integrate Little Rock Central High School. So there's another example. Okay, I'm up to 2 now. Now, did those soldiers fire on the people? No. This doesn't happen in the United States. Now, I can give you some similar examples, but not the same as the U.S. Army. Any guys ever heard of Kent State University? What state is Kent State in? It's in Ohio. Kent State University is in Ohio. In 1972, how many guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, you don't know about this. Okay.
This one in Forrest Gump.
I don't know if they show this in Forrest Gump. But anyhow, guys, Vietnam War protests on college campuses all over the United States, including Wichita State. Okay? At Kent State, the protests had gotten very common and annoying. The president of the university asked for help from the governor of Ohio. He said, we can't get our kids to go to class. We've got these protests constantly on our campus. Can you call in the National Guard to stop these protests? So the president of Kent State says, no more protests on our campus. You tell college kids in the 1960s and 70s not to do something, well, good luck with that. So, no more protests, they protest. And a big protest, too. Oh, we'll show them. The governor calls in the National Guard. This is not President Nixon. This is the governor of Ohio controlling the National Guard. The National Guard shows up. They're told to disperse the protest. How do you disperse a protest? Tear gas. So the National Guard starts firing tear gas at the protesters. Protesters picked up the tear gas and threw it back. Now, what you have is 18, 19, 20, early 20-something protesters. And in the National Guard, you got a lot of 18, 19, 20 National Guardsmen. One of the National Guardmen opened fire on the protesters. Then another. Then another. Before it was over, 9 people were shot. 4 were killed on the campus of Kent State University. Okay? This doesn't happen very often. Okay? Generally, when you call in the National Guard, whether it's a riot, there's protests, people respect that uniform, or at least fear it. So generally, they don't have to use their weapons. And in this case, they didn't need to. It was a mistake. I mean, this kid screwed up. He was a 19-year-old soldier in the National Guard. Okay? Now, Neil Young wrote a song about this. I don't know if you've ever heard of the band Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Okay? Young being the last of that name. Okay? Had a solo career. Very successful solo career. And he wrote a song about Kent State. And I know you guys want to hear it. Sure. What the 1960s is really famous for with music, guys, is protest music. There's a lot of good protest music. You guys have heard of CCR? Creedence Clearwater Revival? Fortunate Son? These types of songs.
You still wearing an
kind of get an idea there. Okay. So Kent State, obviously something that an American history students should know about. Okay. I know we're jumping forward a few decades, but a lot of good, really good protest music from the 60s. People like Jimi Hendrix, I mentioned CCR, Neil Young, and others. So I have a video of the aftermath of the bonus army here. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, guys. This is going to destroy Hoover's ability to run for president again. Okay, it's just. Okay, let me video clips. And Veterans March on Washington.
Americans already tired of Hoover's pessimistic and cautious approach then became outraged by his treatment of a group of World War I veterans in 1932. After the war, Congress issued veterans bonus certificates for their military service worth nearly $1,000 to be redeemed in 1945. Dismayed by the economic outlook of the time, the veterans demanded the immediate payment of their bonuses in full. In an attempt to satisfy their demand, Texas Congressman Wright Patman proposed a bill in which the government would immediately give veterans $500 in cash instead. Shareholders supported Patman's plan. Between 10 and 20,000 veterans and their families peacefully marched to Washington, D.C. This so-called bonus army established a shanty town inside the Capitol building. Hoover provided food and supplies for them, but when Congress vetoed the bill on June 17th, he asked the bonus army to leave. Most left, but approximately 2,000 stayed behind, hoping to meet with Hoover. During the riot, Hoover ordered General Douglas MacArthur and the 12th Infantry Force to remove the veterans. Shocked Americans saw troops use bayonets and tear gas to force the vets to leave. In a melee, more than 1,000 people were gassed, an 8-year-old boy blinded, and an 11-month-old baby was killed. The shantytown burned to the ground. Public support for Hoover foundered, and with a chance to change direction, Americans overwhelmingly embraced a new president in Franklin Delano Roosevelt, popularly known as FDR.
Okay. So, guys, this really, I mean, you have the Depression to begin with, right? And then this Hoover really has no chance of being reelected. Okay. One guy during the election telegrammed Hoover and told Hoover, he said, vote for Roosevelt and make it unanimous. Others said that even dogs took a disliking to Hoover. Very unpopular. Okay. All right. This didn't help. Okay. The Dust Bowl. All right. So you guys all went to middle school in Kansas, right? So you learned about the Dust Bowl. Yes, little Kansas history and so forth. I think I might have mentioned to you at some point, I had to take Kansas history in college at Wichita State under Dr. Miner. It was one of the hardest classes I ever took. Just a piece of advice if I haven't given this to you yet. If you're taking a college class and the professor wrote the book that they're using for the class, drop it. Find a different professor. Okay? Because when they wrote the book, and Dr. Miner literally wrote 9 books on Kansas history, okay? It was the hardest class I took in college, was Kansas history. It was brutal, okay? Rest in peace, Dr. Miner. But he knew everything about Kansas, okay? And one of the stories that I remember from taking his class was not so much the Dust Bowl, but the grasshopper invasion of the 1880s. Did you guys learn about that? Locust grasshoppers. Aren't they the same thing? No. They're like big grasshoppers. Huh? Yeah, They flew in the millions. And they ate. What did they eat? Anything. Like if you had a shovel with a wooden handle, they'd eat the wooden handle. Okay, like they ate everything. And this type of locust had a white belly. So they said when they came in they would fly, yes. And when they came in by the millions, it looked like a snowstorm. They had a white belly. This, I think it was 1887. And that fall, the grasshoppers, locusts, migrated back towards Colorado. Now, you guys know Western Kansas. Like in the summertime, usually August, you get these grasshoppers. You guys ever been hit in the face by one of these things flying through the air? These hard skeletons. My cats love these things. They love the grasshoppers. But it's usually August when, it gets real dry and hot. Well, think about that for a few years where it was dry and hot and just all these locusts. Well, that fall, they started migrating west, and an early cold front came in, an early freeze, and it killed most of them. And thankfully, they didn't come back. Okay, but the Dust Bowl itself, you guys have heard stories. The worst year of the Dust Bowl was probably 1935. Okay, and it covered portions of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, the Texas Panhandle. And you guys ever been to like Amarillo, Texas? It's barren out there, man. In the summertime, everything's brown. They don't get a lot of rain. Panhandle of Oklahoma, and of course Western Kansas is can be during a drought can be really barren. And so we overfarmed a lot of that. The soil was loose, and it got dry, and the wind picked it up, and it moved it. Okay, and it was brutal. Let me show you a video. Got a video on the Dust Bowl, short video.
To make matters even worse, drought, coupled with the overproduction of crops in the Great Plains, turned the area from Texas to Oklahoma into a dust bowl.
There you go.
1934, strong winds blew tons of dust from the plains all the way to the East Coast. Dust even coated New York City and settled on ships 500 miles out to sea in the Atlantic Ocean. Unemployment and poverty hurt everyone, especially children. Many left school to work and help their families survive, and many more went hungry and malnourished. Diet-related illnesses like rickets and scoliosis became all too common. Once again, President Hoover tried to reassure the nation by saying, recovery is just around the corner. But it was not to be, and more Americans grew disenchanted with his policies and administration. Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon, echoed the beliefs of most of Hoover's advisors, but the economy would recover on its own. Hoover thought the government must take some action, but feared making government too strong, and so he chose a conservative approach, calling together business, banking, and labor leaders and urging them to work together and avoid laying off workers or calling strikes. Then he authorized the expenditure of federal funds for large public works projects, like Boulder Dam, later renamed Hoover Dam, to create jobs and wages for thousands of workers. Hoover felt giving direct help to needy Americans would undermine their self-respect and looked to private charities to help the hungry. Instead, he approved more than $2 billion in emergency financing to businesses, hoping their renewed success would trickle down to the people who needed assistance. It didn't. Rather, unemployment rose even higher, and Americans were caught in a web of despair.
Okay, that video kind of helps segue into a couple other things. But the Dust Bowl is obviously going to affect the young and the old the most. The elderly and then infant children. You breathe in that dust. Okay, you probably learned about how people would cover their doors with sheets, wet blankets, towels, cribs with wet blankets and towels, and so forth. Okay, to try and protect people from the dust. A lot of people in Kansas to this day have allergies from dust-related stuff and so forth. It's, you know, it's part of the environment here in Kansas. So, yeah, the Dust Bowl was awful. Okay. So the video I just showed kind of talked about a few of the things that Hoover was willing to do. Okay. So public works, there's that word public. Okay. So when I say public schools, public parks, what am I talking about? Public swimming pools, what am I talking about? Government. When you hear public, you should think government. Okay. Public works, what are works? Jobs. What are these? Government jobs. Now, normally, when you build a road or a bridge, government hires a contractor to do it for you. In this case, we're going to start to see public works where actually the government is running these projects, if that makes sense. Okay. So they spent $2 billion on public works, roads, buildings, dams, like you saw there, the Boulder Dam. Okay. And then the video also mentioned financing $2 billion to business to help keep business on their feet. If business can stay on their feet, then people will still have jobs. That was the idea. Okay. Now, the video presented it as, you know, that this would trickle down to help people, and it helps some. If the railroads were continuing to run, this would help people that worked on the railroads. The banks were open, there would still be financing where people could borrow money and so forth. Okay. This is not unlike what his successor will do, Roosevelt. But again, like the video mentioned, direct assistance is off the table. Hoover's not going to give you something for nothing. And I mentioned this before. This word here, loan, is going to be accompanied by most of these programs that Hoover comes up with the Depression is to loan, not to give. Now, by 1930, did we have bulldozers? Yeah, I mean, we had bulldozers. Okay. Could a bulldozer do the work, what these guys are doing? Yeah. These people needed jobs. They're saying, look at it. It's a whole freaking row of people with wheelbarrows. They all have a job. That's all they wanted. No job was beneath people. Okay. If you were really struggling in life, would you work at McDonald's if you had to? Would you work 2 jobs if you had to support your family? Or would you go on welfare? These people are like, I will do any job. You give me a job, I will do it. Okay? And so, yeah, we could have used wheelbarrows for this, or excuse me, bulldozers for this, but we're giving people dignity. There's dignity in work. Okay? So that's what Hoover's going to try and do. Obviously, it's not going to be enough. Not enough jobs here. Okay? This isn't going to save all the jobs either. How time did we get out today? 50? Now, this is an interesting idea. Iris, you know what a mortgage is? Sorry to put you on the spot. Sophia, you know what a mortgage is? For what? On a what? The loan on a house. We just call it a mortgage. Just a loan on a house. Okay? people were having trouble paying their mortgages, yes? And what did Hoover say was the biggest tragedy of the Depression? Homelessness. So what was the new word? The unhoused. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to loan people money, pay their mortgages.
It's just a double mortgage.
Yeah, I'm waiting for this to process in your brains right now. We're going to loan people to pay their mortgages. Loan people money, pay their mortgages. Loan people loans to pay their loans. Yes. Now, is this going to solve the problem? Will it possibly keep a roof over your head for 6 months or a year? Yes. Guys, this is a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid. That's all it is. Okay? And we needed some Band-Aids. We had a lot of wounds. Okay? We needed Band-Aids. Okay? This does not make any sense. Okay? And when we get to the New Deal under Roosevelt, you're going to look at some of that and you're like, this doesn't make sense. Okay? But trying to do something to help people keep a roof over their head. One of the tragedies of the Depression is homelessness. Okay? So this is what they're going to try and do. Keep a roof over people's heads. Give them a job. Okay? For Hoover, it's not enough. It's not going to do the job. He's not going to get reelected. You understand? Good? Okay. So this is what I've kind of talked about already. Okay, his limitations. Okay, he refused to give direct assistance, money directly to individuals. The video talked about this, that this would undermine their self-respect. So he called on charities, local governments, state governments to do it. This was not the role of the national government. He said it was dangerous for people to get in the habit of receiving charity from the national government. Is he right? Probably depends on your worldview a little bit. Okay. One thing's for sure, this is what Hoover believed, and he stayed with it. It's hard, guys. Life is hard. When you cannot take care of yourself, or heaven forbid, if you have a family and you can't take care of your family, this is hard. Okay? And we talked about this in government class, about welfare programs and so forth. Okay? Obviously, there's got to be a proper balance. What you need, brother? Yeah? I got mine. Here. Open it, throw it over there. Yeah. I mean, we could have a long discussion on this. I don't think it's probably necessary at this point. Okay. What's that? A what? Yeah. That's a haboob. Most people would call it a dust storm. Yes? Proper term is haboob. Where do we get that? From the Middle East. Okay. Did you guys see Mission Impossible? Yes. The one where he's in running through he's in the middle, he's in, what's that city? Dubai. And there's a haboob, a dust storm. He's chasing that guy. It's a great scene. How many of you guys know what I'm talking about? That scene.
Was it, wait, the new one?
It's like 3. Am I?
It's the one with the who. It's like
Well, the new one has a hoodoo in it. Right at the beginning.
Does it?
Yeah, because he's trying to track down the girl, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is kind of cool. Okay, it's in color first of all. Okay, because all the stuff we see on the Dust Bowl is black and white. You know. So this video shows. I think this is in like 1995, maybe 2008. I don't know. We'll look afterwards. This is in Arizona. Okay, and this guy's going to drive into a haboob in the middle of the day. Daylight. It's got some really creepy music to it.
trying to drive into it.
This will give you an idea of what it was like to be in one of these storms.
Why did it start recording so far back?
Yeah, the smart people are pulling off to the side of the road.
I feel like he's just making the screen dark.
Maybe we'll turn his headlights.
I think they are on.
I don't think they're
It's gonna be space out.
on. Why are his car lights?
He's like turns on one side of the eye was the other one of
I think they might be on.
No, I don't think so, because you can see, I think it might be on.
Yeah, but you can only see a little bit.
No, they don't.
Wow.
There's that much dust, it might reflect down.
Okay. I'll put that back up tomorrow. I don't know if YouTube's gonna let me publish this. I showed too many videos today, but we'll see. Yep.